if Friday had not been the 4th of July. I'd have come into the office that morning, I would have said to Sandra, I would have said, let's change the sermon title. And I'm not sure if changing it would have been wise or not. Pastor Rick Warren of Purpose-Driven Life fame says this. He says, holding on to something can either be a sign of strength or a sign of stupidity. And the same is true of letting go of something. And it's why you need God's wisdom to decide if you should let go of something or to hang on to something. But since it's the 4th of July, God got the day off from me asking about sermon titles. He wants to make things lighter, to lighten our loads. Human beings are hoarders. I'm not talking about things. I'm talking about hoarding the stuff that wounds us and the stuff that worries us. The stuff that hurts us, the stuff that burdens us. I recently read a list of the least Christian things a Christian can say to someone else. And so I looked at that list. I wanted to see if I used any of the things. The first one is this. Nothing shows compassion like reminding someone their problems are small compared to starving children or someone with cancer. I think of my poor kids and their child-sized problems, especially in the back seat. When I would get tired of hearing about those problems, something like that would come out. Be grateful there are people starving, there are people suffering, all of that. The author points out that by the same logic, a sandwich ought to taste better if you're eating it in front of a starving person. It's just not good logic. There were others on the list. It turned out I used all of those too, except for the one, Are You Saved? But all the rest I had used. It's all too easy, was the point of the article, to add to someone else's burden with what we say. Jesus speaks of his yoke being a light yoke. And he's referring not just to those yokes that go on oxen to pull the plow. He's referring to what was called the yoke in his day. The interpretation of the laws of God that the teachers would give the people. The things they would give the people to do to be made right with God, to be made holy. And that list is a changing and fickle list. The first charge where I served, there was one church in that charge that was a half-size church. Actually, it was full-size, but it was half-size because 25 years earlier, there was a United Methodist pastor who came to town. And he decided to create a list of things people must do or must not do if they were United Methodist and to belong to the church. And there was dancing, and there was being out on Saturday nights, and there was what women should wear. It seems to always be what women should wear, not what men should wear. And then there was playing cards. One of the couples in the congregation said they remembered on the farm that when the brother's car would turn into the driveway, they would look around the house as quickly as they could, find any deck of cards they could, and hide it away so that it wouldn't upset him and get him started when he arrived. He joined the new United Methodist Church that had to drop the United Methodist name because it split off from the other. It became an evangelical free church, which is kind of ironic because it was anything but free. Even more ironic is 25 years later, that pastor and myself would sit in one another's office and we would plan community things. Somehow all those fickle rules 25 years later didn't seem quite so relevant, and those who were new in the congregation knew nothing about them, and those who were in the congregations for a long time tried not to talk about them because those were hard, difficult, burdensome years. The list of rules in Jesus' day, the list of expectations was lengthy. And truth be told, we are always creating expectations for one another. There's a reason that the fastest growing church in the Fargo-Moorhead area, that church in the Dome, is called the Church for People Who Don't Like Church. But my guess is they have their rules. My guess is I could go over there and I'm just thinking of 2 or 3 sentences I could probably say and be shunned. I remember being in a park many years back now, and there was this person who came up to me and wanted to talk religion. I didn't really, but started talking religion. I told him I was a United Methodist pastor. He asked me if I was saved. I said, yes, I was saved. It didn't convince him because there was something suspicious about a United Methodist pastor. So he asked me if I would pray with him and be saved. And I told him it was my day off. So he went home with this story of this United Methodist pastor who just wouldn't get saved. Joni Eareckson Tada, quadriplegic Christian inspirational speaker. She was visiting with her husband on the way home from a clinic appointment after cancer treatment. And one of them said, you know, suffering is like a splashover of hell. And they talked about that for a while. And when they arrived home, her husband Ken said, if that's a splashover from hell, what does a splashover from heaven look like? And they began talking about that. They began talking about sunsets, or having all the bills paid. They began talking about nature's beauty. And then they decided, well, those might be splashovers from heaven. But then Johnny said, I think splashover from heaven is when you're in the midst of a splashover from hell and you discover Jesus is there with you, leading you out. There's nothing more powerful and poignant than finding Jesus in our pain. Nothing better than being led out of those burdensome, dark places. Because the last thing Jesus ever wants to do is add any more burden to us. Being near Jesus is to be feeling freer and lighter. Jesus' yoke is light, and the rules are few. Love God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. The yoke is meant to be light. The way easy, the rules simple. John Wesley's 3 simple rules. Don't do any harm. Do all the good you can. Stay in love with God. Just one more way of saying love God and neighbor. I invite you as you come to the communion table a little later today to think of those burdens that you're carrying. There probably is more than one burden. But pick one and try and leave it at the altar. What leaves you feeling most distant from God? Try to let go of that. What leaves you feeling like you don't measure up because somebody else has told you you don't? Or you've told yourself you don't? Leave it behind. The Facebook post that started me thinking about a different sermon title this week was of a Polish proverb I had never heard before, but I'll probably be using it a lot from here on out because I just loved it. If someone dumps expectations on you, or you dump expectations on yourself that don't belong there, that God doesn't want you to have, you can simply say, this isn't my circus. Those aren't my monkeys. Love that. Letting go of the things that don't belong in our lives, the things that hurt us and harm us. That is God's gift to us. How will you let God set you free this week? How will you help another be set free this week?